I buried my wife 3 months ago. A week later, her sister walked in with crocodile tears and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She said she wanted to help me sort through things. Translation: she wanted the necklace, Eleanor's necklace, the one she'd envied for decades. I made coffee, I listened, and I watched her glance toward the mantel every 30 seconds. People like Vivian always reveal themselves if you give them enough silence. So I let her talk. I let her touch the box. What she didn't know was that the moment she did, she set everything in motion. Like, share, and comment if you've ever seen Karma arrive dressed as calm. Where are you watching from tonight? I still wake before dawn. 3 months on, my body hasn't learned she's gone. The habit of listening for Eleanor's footsteps is too deeply carved into the quiet. Every morning the house breathes beside me, slow, shallow, as if waiting for her voice to fill it again. When the kettle hums, the window fogs, and I catch my reflection, a man practicing calm until it looks like peace. People mistake that calm for acceptance. It isn't. It's maintenance. The first week after the funeral blurred into cards, casseroles, and polite condolences from neighbors who never really knew her. Vivian's name appeared in my phone before I'd even finished writing thank you notes. "Just checking on you," she said. I didn't reply. I knew she'd come anyway. The day she arrived, the air smelled of cold rain and roses, cheap ones from the supermarket. She pressed them into my hands like a prop, then looked past me into the house. Grief makes some people smaller. It makes others hungrier. I let her talk in the kitchen. She spoke about Eleanor in half-truths and fragments, the way someone does when memory isn't affection but opportunity. Her tone softened only when her gaze drifted to the mantel. She tried to hide it, but I saw it. The pulse of wanting. The oak box sat there, same as it had for years. Eleanor's necklace rested inside, sapphire catching light like trapped water. The box had been locked since the night before the funeral. No one had touched it, not even me. Vivian asked if she could help sort through things. Her voice folded over itself, a ribbon of false concern. I made coffee, measured the silence, and gave her exactly what she wanted: time. People reveal themselves if you give them enough of it. She wandered through the living room, trailing her fingers along the piano Eleanor loved. When she spoke again, she sounded rehearsed. Eleanor would have wanted me to have something of hers. I didn't answer. I wanted to hear how far she'd go. She turned toward me, almost smiling. "That necklace. She used to say it was meant for me once, before you." A lie. Eleanor had told me that story years ago. Vivian borrowing the pendant for a party, returning it broken, never apologizing. The fracture line had been soldered shut, thin but permanent, like most truths between sisters. I placed her coffee on the table. "You still take 2 sugars?" She blinked, surprised I remembered. I always remember. She sat, sipped, and began to fill the room with her version of comfort. I let her. Beneath her words, I could already hear what she wanted most: to rewrite the ending so she didn't come second again. The snow outside thickened, pressing against the windows. The world shrank to the space between us, her ambition and my patience. I realized then how grief can be sharpened into something useful, something exact. When she finally reached toward the box, fingertips brushing the lid, I said nothing. The lock resisted, of course. It always did. She looked at me, eyes bright with practiced innocence. "Do you still have the key?" "Yes," I said, and let the words sit there. In that moment, I saw it clearly. The same calculation I'd seen in boardrooms and negotiations. Vivian thought this was a transaction, sentiment for possession. But Eleanor had known better. She'd left instructions, just not the kind Vivian could understand. I walked to the study, opened the drawer, and let the brass key rest in my palm. It was warm from the lamp's light, engraved with her initials. A simple thing, but deliberate. Eleanor had trusted me to use it wisely. When I returned, Vivian was still by the mantel, pretending to admire the photograph from our anniversary. Her reflection in the glass smiled back at her, softer, younger, the way she wanted to be remembered. I placed the key on the table between us. "If you think you deserve it," I said quietly, "open it." Her hand hovered, uncertain. I watched the hesitation bloom into greed. The moment she touched the key, the plan I'd been building in silence finally began to breathe. Eleanor began sleeping downstairs when the stairs grew cruel. I carried her books, her blanket, the blue lamp she liked by the window. Every night the sea wind rattled the panes, and she'd smile faintly, saying it sounded like our first winter here. I kept a notebook then, medication times, doctor calls, tiny victories like walk to the garden. Order helped me stay upright. What I didn't write was how the house changed temperature when she breathed, how each exhale seemed to teach me what absence would feel like. She never asked how bad it was. She already knew. The doctor had left a neat folder on the counter. She never opened it. Instead, she polished the necklace. That sapphire had belonged to her mother, passed to her at 18. I'd caught her, once tracing its curve with a trembling thumb, whispering, "I want to leave it right." The key appeared 2 days later, small, brass, wrapped in tissue on her bedside table. No note, only the scent of her perfume and a faint lipstick print. I asked, "For the jewelry box?" Her eyes stayed closed. "For what comes after," she murmured. We didn't speak of Vivian. We didn't need to. Every family dinner, every forced holiday had already said enough. Vivian's compliments always landed like negotiations. "You wear it beautifully." She would have loved that piece. Eleanor had learned to answer with silence. The morning light turned thin and silver. She asked me to open the curtains wider. The frost made lace on the glass. She said it looked like wedding embroidery. I sat beside her, counting her breaths, pretending it was a habit instead of a warning. "I don't want things fought over," she said finally. Her voice was soft but exacting. "Promise me you'll protect what's real." "I will," I told her. It wasn't sentiment. It was contract. She smiled, eyes half closed. "You always keep ledgers." I wanted to argue, to tell her I wasn't measuring anything. But she knew me too well. Even love had been a balance sheet we both respected. Honesty on one side, forgiveness on the other. Later that evening, she asked for music. I played the old record she liked, the one with the crackling violin. She hummed along until the air ran out of her voice. When the last note faded, she looked toward the mantel and said, "It belongs where truth can't be touched." I thought she meant the necklace. I understand now she meant the memory. The night she left, the wind fell completely still. I sat in the chair by the bed until dawn, waiting for sound to return. When it didn't, I walked through the house, switching off every light, one by one, as if closing a ledger. I placed the necklace in the box, turned the key, and set it on the mantel. The act felt neither final nor ceremonial, just accurate. In the weeks that followed, sympathy arrived in envelopes, casseroles, and scripted phone calls. Vivian's message came last. "Thinking of you. Let me know if you need help with Eleanor's things." I stared at it for a long time before deleting it. Sometimes at night, I still hear Eleanor's voice at the edge of sleep, measured, steady, as if reminding me, protect what's real. So when Vivian finally crossed the threshold, I already knew how this would end. I found the letter 3 days after the funeral. It wasn't hidden, not really. Eleanor had placed it where she knew I'd look when routine finally felt wrong, inside the top drawer of my desk, under the spare fountain pen I never used. The envelope was cream, her handwriting small and disciplined, like a signature held under glass. I turned it over twice before opening it. The paper smelled faintly of the lavender oil she kept by the bed. For a long minute I couldn't read. I just stared at her name, letting the silence test me. When I finally unfolded the page, the sound of the paper breaking its crease felt louder than breath. Richard, you always need the full picture before you move a piece. I trust that instinct. It kept us safe more than once. But there are things logic can't audit. I want you to have this necklace because you never looked at it for what it was worth, only for what it meant. Protect that meaning. Vivian will come for it. Don't hate her. Envy is her only inheritance. But don't give her the chance to turn my memory into currency. Keep the key. Use it when the time asks you to. You'll know. I love you in the way quiet people love, through details, through order. Let that be enough. Eleanor. I read it twice, then a third time, hearing her cadence between the lines. She had written it the way she lived, precise, without flourish. Each sentence built like a column of figures, exact, undeniable. Outside, a late winter wind moved through the hedges. The house had its own stillness again, one that didn't comfort or accuse. It simply observed. I placed the letter beside the box and stared at both until the afternoon light shifted. The necklace caught a glint of sun, a sudden blue spark against the wood. It looked alive for a second, as though waiting for instruction. Part of me wanted to lock everything away, to seal her memory inside the same silence she'd trusted me with. But another part, the part she had always seen clearly, understood that her letter wasn't a plea. It was direction. That night I poured a measure of the wine we'd shared on our last evening together and sat at her piano. The keys felt colder than I remembered. I let my fingers rest on middle C, the note she always used to find her place. Vivian's name drifted through my thoughts like a figure rehearsing her entrance. Eleanor had known she would come. She'd left the entire design of this moment mapped out in her letter, the object, the key, and me as its keeper. When I folded the page again, I noticed one last line written on the back in faint pencil, almost erased. Truth waits for its moment. It wasn't a farewell. It was instruction. I slid the letter into a plain folder and locked it in the drawer beside the estate papers. Not to hide it, but to give it weight, to make it part of the order she trusted me to keep. Since that day, I've never needed to reread it. Every word has stayed where she placed it, in the quiet part of my mind where intent lives. So when Vivian's car pulled into the driveway this morning, I didn't feel surprise or anger. Only the certainty that the moment Eleanor wrote about had arrived. The sound of the key meeting the lock was smaller than I expected, just a metallic click that seemed to draw the air out of the room. Vivian's hand trembled, though she tried to hide it with a practiced smile. "Are you sure you want to do this?" I asked. She hesitated, eyes on the box. Eleanor would have wanted me to have it. I said nothing. Let the lie hang between us until it lost its balance. She turned the key. The hinge released with a sigh, as if the box itself had been waiting to breathe. Inside, the necklace lay exactly as I'd left it, coiled like a sleeping thing. The sapphire caught the morning light, throwing a thin line of blue across her wrist. Vivian exhaled, a small, triumphant sound, and for a moment she looked younger, almost gentle. "I always told her it should be mine," she whispered. I studied the reflection in the glass cabinet behind her. A woman rehearsing gratitude while her fingers calculated ownership. "Then take it," I said quietly. She blinked, startled. "What?" "If you believe she'd want that, take it." Her expression faltered. "Greed rarely expects permission. It thrives on resistance." She glanced at me, searching for the trap. I gave her none, only silence. She lifted the necklace from its lining. The chain slipped through her fingers like water, the sapphire resting against her palm. For an instant, the house held its breath. Eleanor's letter had warned me about this moment, not in words, but in intent. Use the key when the time asks you to. Vivian turned toward the mirror, holding the pendant to her throat. "It suits me, doesn't it?" she said. It suited her, I answered. Her smile thinned. "You always took her side." "There were no sides," I said. "Only truth." She set the necklace down, forcing a laugh. "You make it sound like a courtroom." I met her eyes. "In some ways it is." She didn't understand. Not yet. I reached for the drawer beneath the mantel and pulled out a plain envelope. Her name was written across the front in Eleanor's handwriting. steady, unmistakable. Vivian froze. "Where did you—" "She left it for you," I said. Inside the box under the lining, her voice thinned. "You read it?" "No, it wasn't addressed to me." For the first time, I saw fear in her posture, not guilt, but anticipation of something she couldn't control. She slid the letter free, unfolding it with cautious fingers. Her eyes moved line by line, and whatever color remained in her face began to drain away. When she finished, she folded it once, then again, until the paper trembled between her hands. "She hated me," she whispered. "No," I said softly. "She understood you." Vivian looked up. "She said I'm not to keep it, that it belongs to Grace." That's what she wrote. She can't. She's gone. She can't decide that now. I didn't answer. Outside, snow was falling again, thin and soundless. Vivian's voice cracked. "You planned this." "Eleanor did," I said. "I only followed her instructions." She stepped back, clutching the necklace. "You think this makes you righteous?" "No," I said. "Just exact." For a long moment she stood there, staring at the pendant as though it might argue on her behalf. Then she set it back inside the box, slower than she'd lifted it. The sapphire caught the light one last time before the lid closed. The click of the lock sounded final. Vivian turned toward the door, her footsteps soft against the carpet. "You've always enjoyed control," she said, "only when it's deserved." When the door shut behind her, the house exhaled. The necklace remained where it belonged, untouched, and Eleanor's handwriting glowed faintly in the morning light. I poured a glass of wine and watched the snow thicken, the quiet resettling around me like armor. The first move was over. From the window above the study, I watched her cross the drive. The snow had thickened, turning the walkway into a slow white current. Vivian moved through it without direction, heels sinking, shoulders tight, one hand still gripping her bag as though the letter inside might change its meaning if she held it hard enough. She stopped halfway to the car, turned once toward the house. Through the glass, I saw the calculation flicker behind her eyes, that same habit of rehearsing control before she speaks. But there was no one left to perform for. Her expression softened into something I hadn't seen in years, confusion that looked almost like regret. I didn't move. The curtain hid me well enough. She stood there longer than the cold should have allowed, reading the air, maybe waiting for the sound of the door opening again. When it didn't, she unlocked the car and sat there, engine idling, headlights painting the snow yellow. The letter would be in her lap. Eleanor's handwriting always disarmed people. Even her reproach felt like affection. I wondered which line had broken Vivian first, the instruction to leave the necklace for Grace, or the last sentence Eleanor had written to her. "I forgive you, but I do not trust you." A small mercy delivered with surgical precision. Vivian killed the engine. The quiet settled again. I could see her lips moving, rehearsing whatever story she'd tell herself. People like her always need a narrative where they're the injured party. She'd call Grace later, perhaps, claim confusion about Mother's intentions. She might even mention my coldness, the way I misinterpreted the will. That was fine. Precision doesn't need to defend itself. It only needs to hold minutes past. She finally stepped out of the car and came back toward the porch, not to knock, but to leave something. When she bent down, a flash of blue caught the light. The necklace. She laid it on the mat as carefully as if it were a child she didn't want to wake. Then she walked away. I waited until her figure dissolved into the snowfall before opening the door. The pendant looked darker against the white, the sapphire no longer bright but deep, almost bruised. I picked it up, felt the cold bite into my palm, and carried it back inside. On the mantel, I set it beside the locked box instead of in it. Eleanor's letter to Vivian still rested on the table. I left it there too. Some victories don't need to be declared. They just need to be witnessed. I poured another measure of wine and stood by the window, watching her taillights fade down the street. For a moment I thought she might stop, reverse, return for one last argument. But the lights didn't waver. She was gone. The house seemed lighter somehow, as if the weight of her expectation had been keeping the air tense. I realized then that Eleanor's plan hadn't been about punishment. It was about restoration, putting everything and everyone back in their rightful places. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Vivian would lick her wounds, gather her allies, and decide she'd been wronged. People who build their lives on envy can't live without an audience. She'd need someone to listen. When I closed the curtains, I could almost hear Eleanor's voice again. Truth waits for its moment. Outside, the snow covered her footprints completely. By morning there would be no trace of her visit, except the necklace, gleaming faintly in the dark like an unanswered question. Morning arrived pale and undecided. Snow covered everything, the porch, the path, the memory of last night. The world had been simplified to white silence and faint light. I've always liked mornings like this. They erase the unnecessary. I made coffee, the same way Eleanor used to. One scoop less than I prefer, because she said bitterness ruined good conversation. The ritual still feels like dialogue, every motion a response to her absence. The necklace lay on the mantel, still cold from the night air. I turned it in my hand, studying the way the sapphire gathered light. Some objects don't just hold value. They hold alignment. She'd worn it on every important day. Our anniversary dinners, the birth of Grace, even the night we signed the deed for this house. It wasn't vanity. It was orientation. Now it rested between my fingers like a compass needle still pointing toward her intent. I set it beside the box again and opened my notebook. The one with the green spine where I used to track medications and schedules. I started a new list. Date, December 12 event. Vivian's visit. Requested possession of Eleanor's necklace. Outcome, returned item. Left note and letter unreadable to others. Order comforts me. When chaos threatens, documentation restores sense. Eleanor knew that. It's why she gave me the key, the letter, and silence. They're all tools of record-keeping. By mid-morning, the phone buzzed twice. Grace, checking in. I told her everything was fine, and it was, in the technical sense. She asked if her aunt had visited. I said yes, briefly. I didn't mention the necklace or the letter. Grace worries too much about fairness. I've learned that fairness and truth rarely agree. After the call, I found myself rereading Eleanor's letter to me. Not the words this time, but the structure, the order of her reasoning. She'd written it the same way she balanced her garden, precise, nothing wasted. Even her forgiveness of Vivian had logic to it. Forgiveness, I've realized, isn't mercy. It's clarity. By noon, the sun had melted the snow off the hedges. The world looked polished again, restored to its usual disguise. I took the necklace to my study and placed it in the small safe beneath the desk. Not because I feared theft, Vivian wouldn't dare return so soon, but because order demands containment. I locked it, spun the dial, and wrote down the combination in Eleanor's old address book. Then I tore out the page, folded it once, and placed it inside her letter. Some things need to live together. As I closed the drawer, a movement outside caught my eye, just a figure near the mailbox, too far to identify. The shape lingered, then vanished behind the hedge. Vivian, perhaps. Or her messenger, I didn't check. I simply noted the time in my ledger. The house has become a ledger of its own. Every silence entered, every detail archived. The faint scent of lavender still lingers near her chair. The window still hums when the wind shifts east, and the key still rests exactly where she left it. People think revenge is about satisfaction. It isn't. It's about accuracy. When the clock struck noon, I felt it again, that calm precision Eleanor had trusted me to wield. The next move wasn't mine to make yet, but I could already sense it forming. Outside, the sun turned the snow to water, revealing the faintest trace of footprints near the gate, too small to be mine. I closed the curtain and wrote one final line in my notebook. Truth is patient, but not polite. By the end of the week, the snow had receded to brittle shadows along the walk. The quiet had almost convinced me she'd accepted the outcome. Then the envelope arrived, white, official, the kind of paper that believes in its own authority. It was addressed in block print. Mr. Richard Alcott. No return name, only a law office crest embossed at the corner. Vivian had found her audience. I didn't open it immediately. I set it on the desk beside Eleanor's letter and watched the two envelopes sit together. the personal and the procedural, affection and calculation staring each other down. When I finally slit it open, the language was predictable. Our client, Ms. Vivian Moreau, asserts her right to items of sentimental and familial value, requests cooperative transfer, reserves legal remedy, polite warfare. I read it twice, then a third time, hearing Vivian's cadence hiding between the lines. She'd always preferred other people's voices to do her fighting. Letters gave her distance without accountability, Grace called that afternoon. Her voice carried hesitation. Uncle Richard. Aunt Vivian said there's been confusion about Mom's things. There it was, the echo through family channels. I could almost see Vivian rehearsing her lines over tea, painting herself as the misunderstood mourner. She mentioned the necklace, Grace continued. Said Mom wanted it to stay in the family. It's staying, I said. Exactly where your mother placed it, Grace hesitated. She sounded upset. Maybe you could talk to her, settle it quietly. I intend to, I said, and changed the subject. After the call, I sat in the study, the letter still open. The wording was clumsy but revealing. It wasn't about property. It was about validation. Vivian wanted a signature, mine, acknowledging that she still mattered. I poured a small drink, let the burn center me, and took out my greenspine notebook. Date, December 19 event. Letter from Vivian's attorney. Action. Record. No reply. Let her build her case in public silence. Documentation first, response later. By evening, I walked the perimeter of the townhouse complex. The neighbors nodded politely, unaware that every hedge and lamppost now belonged to the geometry of a coming dispute. I could almost feel Eleanor's composure guiding each step. Truth waits for its moment. Back inside, I took the necklace from the safe. The sapphire caught the lamplight, calm as ever, indifferent to human urgency. I laid it beside Eleanor's letter, then added the attorney's note beneath them, 3 artifacts of a single conversation still unfolding. The order pleased me. The world was trying to escalate. I was returning it to sequence. Before bed, I drafted my own letter. Not to send, not yet. Just a record, Ms. Moreau. You've mistaken silence for concession. My wife's wishes are documented and your conduct recorded. When truth chooses to surface, it will not require an audience. I signed it, folded it once, and placed it under the necklace box. Not for her to read, but for the archive Eleanor left me to maintain. Outside, a wind had risen, rattling the windows again. The season was turning, carrying old patterns forward, the way grief does when it hasn't finished teaching. Vivian believed she'd begun a legal process. She didn't realize she'd entered an accounting, and in accounting, every claim demands reconciliation. The next morning, the envelope still sat on my desk, heavy only with its own arrogance. I'd left it unopened overnight again, not from hesitation but from discipline. In finance, you learn that the first reply to provocation sets the exchange rate of power. I brewed coffee, opened my notebook, and read through my last entry. Truth is patient, but not polite. That line still felt accurate. What Vivian didn't understand was that patience isn't weakness. It's the staging ground for precision. By 9 o'clock, I called my attorney, a retired colleague named Alan. Reese, he'd handled Eleanor's estate, documents and understood discretion. She's moving fast, he said after skimming. The copy I'd scanned. She's moving predictably. I corrected. Alan chuckled. You want me to answer or let her talk to herself? Neither. File a note of acknowledgement, no statement. Let her think she's winning the pause. Classic Alcott, he murmured. Always balancing the books. After the call, I walked through the house, checking the details that had become my ritual audit. Locked drawers, labeled folders, the safe under the desk. Each object was a column in a ledger of control. By noon, Grace arrived unannounced. Her coat still held the chill of the outside air. Dad, I just had lunch with Aunt Vivian, she began carefully. She said you're refusing to release Mom's necklace. I'm refusing to rewrite your mother's will, I said. Grace sighed. She's hurt. She says the letter was cruel. It was honest, I said. Same thing, maybe, she whispered. I studied her face. The same measured calm Eleanor carried, but with the rawness of youth. Did she ask you to call me? She didn't have to, Grace said. I just thought someone should stop this before it turns ugly. It already did, I said. Years ago. Grace frowned but didn't argue. She glanced toward the mantel where the necklace box no longer sat. You moved it? Yes. Where? Somewhere safe, I said. From everyone, including memory. She didn't press further. Instead, she walked to the window and looked out at the fading snow. Mom hated conflict, she said softly. She also hated dishonesty, I replied. She just expressed it differently. After she left, I sat in the quiet again. Grace meant well. She always did. But Vivian's strategy was working, forcing me to appear defensive, sowing doubt through empathy. That's how manipulators survive, by turning decency into leverage. I reopened Eleanor's letter for the first time in days. The graphite line on the back, "Truth waits for its moment," seemed sharper than ever. I realized it wasn't advice. It was instruction. Truth doesn't announce itself. It arrives documented. That afternoon, I began compiling what I'd always kept. Copies of estate files. Old family photos showing the necklace clearly around Eleanor's neck. Receipts of maintenance. Even the recording from the lawyer's office where she'd specified her intent. It wasn't obsession, it was architecture. Every proof in its place. By evening, the binder was complete. I labeled it Vivian Account 01 and locked it in the safe beside the necklace. One object of sentiment, one of evidence, each balanced against the other. Outside, the wind carried a brittle hush across the garden. I thought of Vivian rehearsing her outrage, perhaps calling another lawyer, perhaps drafting another letter. That was fine. Noise was her native language. Silence was mine. Before bed, I wrote a single line in my ledger. The counterweight is ready. Then I switched off the light and let the quiet rebuild itself around me, steady as a closing door. The call came on a Thursday. Alan's tone was even, but his choice of words told me enough. Vivian's filed notice. She's going to the press before the probate court. Of course she was. Vivian never understood the difference between attention and legitimacy. Within an hour, the first story appeared online. Widow's sister denied family heirloom by controlling brother-in-law. A photograph accompanied it. Vivian outside a cafe, chin lifted in fragile dignity, a journalist pretending to listen. I read the article once, then again, not for the content but for the omissions. No mention of the letter Eleanor left, no mention of Grace's rightful inheritance, just the predictable portrait, the grieving sister silenced by an unfeeling man guarding his wealth. That night, Grace called again. Dad, they're quoting you. They said you told Aunt Vivian she didn't deserve anything. I said nothing to the press. I know, she whispered. But everyone else thinks you did. She can have the noise, I said. It keeps her occupied. Grace was quiet for a long moment. It's ugly, Dad. Yes, I said. Truth often looks that way before it settles. After we hung up, I poured a small drink and sat at the desk. The binder marked Vivian Account 001 waited in the drawer, a patient witness. I added a page, public statement issued, none. Evidence, complete. Then I called Alan. File for injunctive relief, I said. On what grounds? Defamation. But don't push it. Let them know we're prepared to prove the will and the letter in open court. He hesitated. You want this public? I want her to see the weight of evidence before she drowns in her own story. After the call, I stood by the window. Across the courtyard, another townhouse's television flickered blue through sheer curtains. For a second, the reflection of light on the glass looked like the sapphire in the necklace. Steady, unbothered. I remembered Eleanor polishing that stone once, saying, "It shows the truth of whoever holds it." She meant it metaphorically. I wondered what Vivian's reflection looked like now. The next day, the story widened. Comment sections filled with strangers dissecting our lives. The noise spread like mildew, silent at first, then unmistakable. I refused to feed it. Silence is combustible. It consumes gossip from within. Grace visited that evening, frustration written all over her. You're letting her win the narrative, she said. I'm letting her build it, I replied. It will collapse under its own exaggeration. She shook her head. You're turning this into a chess match. It already was, I said. Your mother knew the opening moves before either of us. Grace looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. I hope you know what you're doing. I always have, I said, though the truth felt heavier than confidence. After she left, I opened Eleanor's letter again. The pencil line, "Truth waits for its moment," seemed to pulse under the lamplight. I understood it differently now. It wasn't about patience anymore. It was about timing, so I drafted a short statement. No emotion, no defense, just fact. The necklace in question was left to my daughter, Grace Alcott, per Eleanor Alcott's signed instructions dated March 5th. Documentation available upon request. No further comment. I sent it to Alan with one note. Release only when she speaks again. Then I closed the laptop, turned off the lamp, and let the house return to darkness. Outside, snow had begun again, thin, deliberate, erasing footprints as it fell. Noise has momentum, but so does truth. And sooner or later, one of them runs out of air. The letter from Alan arrived on a Monday morning, sealed in the sober way legal mail always is. Inside was a single sheet, case withdrawn. No further action required. No explanation, no apology. Vivian had simply folded her game. I set the paper beside Eleanor's letter and the necklace, aligning the edges until they formed a perfect rectangle. For months, everything had leaned toward this moment, and now it sat motionless, complete but strangely lightless. Like a painting after the gallery empties, Alan called a few hours later. She didn't want discovery, he said. Once she realized the letter would surface, she told her lawyer to end it. I imagine she'll pivot to a new story soon. She always does, I said. Do you want to pursue costs? No, let her keep the illusion of escape, he paused. Grace? She'll understand in time. After the call, I walked through the house. The air felt thinner, as if a window had been opened somewhere. On the mantel, dust traced the outline of where the box used to sit. I'd moved it to the safe permanently. Order restored itself in small gestures. By afternoon, Grace arrived. No coat this time, no hesitation. She saw the document on the table and exhaled. So it's done? Yes. She told the press she dropped it for personal reasons. That's one truth, I said. She studied me for a long moment. You never hated her, did you? I tried to, I said. It never stayed. Mom wouldn't have wanted hate. No, I said. But she understood correction. Grace smiled faintly, her mother's exact smile, and looked at the necklace gleaming through the glass of the safe. What happens to it now? It waits, I said. When you're ready, it's yours. She nodded once, understanding more than I expected. That evening, I opened the study window. The snow had melted into gray slush, and the street beyond the gate looked unremarkable again. I could hear distant laughter from the neighbors' children, a sound that hadn't touched this house in months. I poured one last glass of the wine Eleanor and I never finished. The bottle had aged badly. It tasted sharp and metallic, but the act mattered more than the flavor. I sat at the desk and opened the green-spined notebook. The last page waited blank. I wrote slowly, date January 3 event. Vivian withdraws claim. Outcome. Eleanor's intent preserved. Note. Truth arrived on schedule. Then I closed the cover and set the pen on top. For the first time since she died, the house felt balanced. Not peaceful exactly, but settled. The kind of quiet that doesn't accuse or comfort. It just holds. I thought of Eleanor's final words. Protect what's real. I had. But protection is a lonely occupation. Grace called out from the kitchen, asking if I wanted tea. Her voice moved easily through the rooms, alive and ordinary. I realized that's what Eleanor had left me to protect as well. The ordinary. The space for life to resume. When Grace left later that night, she hugged me without a word. I watched her walk down the path, the faint rhythm of her steps steady against the winter air. On the mantel, a single frame still held our last family photograph. Eleanor in the center, Vivian on one side, me on the other. The light had faded behind the glass, leaving our reflections faintly visible over our younger faces. I whispered, "Ledger closed." Then I turned off the lamp, and for the first time in months, The dark felt honest. Some truths don't need noise. They just need time. Eleanor used to say, silence reveals what character hides. And I've come to believe her. In the end, it wasn't about revenge or victory. It was about correction, restoring balance where greed tried to rewrite memory. If you've ever watched someone mistake possession for love, like this story, share it with someone who understands that silence has power. And tell me in the comments, do you believe truth always finds its moment? Subscribe for more real stories where justice doesn't shout, it simply arrives.